It's better to have loved and lost than to never have loved at all. Well, I don't know about all that, but today we're going to dig a little bit deeper into grief. Stick around as I talk about the symptoms of grief. Hello, 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 and happy Wednesday to you. You are listening to the Manifest on Purpose show. I am your host, Kimbaley. I help you transform your mind so that you can become a better person for yourself and for those around you. Thank you so much for stopping by, sharing your time and energy with me. Thank you for subscribing here and on the website. And thank you for inviting your friends and inviting other guests to get more information about self. Remember, you can always reach out to me at connect, CONNECT Kimbaley, KIMBALEY.com, and that is connect, CONNECT at Kimbaley, KIMBALEY.com. Use this email to show some love or to let me know that a topic that you heard on the show is something that you resonated with. Also, leave your topic suggestions and show ideas at connect@kimbaley.com. And while you're here, I may as well go ahead and tell you exactly how I feel about you. The God in me loves the God in you. Now, I've taken this grief thing to a whole nother level. I'm going to do a series on this because I found out that there are so many people that actually go through grief and don't understand it. Today, I'm going to be talking about how there are so many people that go through grief and don't even recognize that they are grieving. And I just want to say that grief can happen in so many different ways. Most of the time, we hear the word grief, we associate it with a death, a loss in that sense. But grief is a natural state that at some point all of us will go through. And it's a process, and that's one of the things that I want to talk about. That's why I felt it necessary to make this a series. One of the most common misunderstandings about grief is that grief only happens when we lose a loved one through death or dying, and that's not necessarily so. Grief is a result of losing anything. It can be a job, it could be a home, it could be a car. It's not just subject to someone that you're close to dying. In this series, I'm going to allow you to get all up in my business. And this is something that I don't normally do because I'm usually a reserved and quiet person. But as I talk about grief, I am going to be using some of the things that I have experienced grief from over the years. Today, I'm going to talk about the symptoms of grief because, as I said earlier, a lot of people are not aware of those symptoms, and that certainly happened to me because the very first time that I experienced grief, I was a young girl. I can't even remember how young I was at the time. It was during the time that my mom and dad separated. I remember my dad being in my life for at least the first 5-6 years, and then things started to go downhill. And being a child, I really did not pay too much attention. I just knew that there was a lot of chaos going on in the home. I wasn't able to process it. And it seems like I just woke up one day and it was over. I had grown accustomed to us living together as one big happy family, and it seemed from out of nowhere that changed, and it seemed like that change came overnight when it was no longer the family together, it was my mother and the children. The loss of my father in that way was the first time that I can say that I ever experienced grief. And of course, no, at the time, I did not know what grief was. As I said, I was unable to process all of this. And even if someone would have came to me and said, you are grieving, at that age, I couldn't have understood. I can remember what the change was like at that time. I always was peeping out the window or peeping out the door, just hoping that my dad would appear, that he would come around. And sometimes he'd say he'd come see us, but he didn't come see us. And so that was another layer that we had to endure because of the loss through that separation. And as I was thinking about this conversation, it made me wonder how many other people experience grief but don't really understand that it is grief that they're experiencing. I'm sure there has to be a lot of people. So what I decided to do is I decided to do a little research, and I found some of the symptoms of grief. And when I look at these symptoms, it makes all the sense in the world why so many people can't recognize that they are grieving. It's because that these symptoms, a lot of them, are things that we go through sometimes on a regular basis, but we just continue to push through those things. You want to know the real reason why we push through those things? It's not that we're trying to prove that we are strong or that we're trying to get it done no matter what. It's because we're so used to being in stress mode that these symptoms have become normal to us. So here's some of the symptoms. The very first one is one that I can relate to. Lack of energy. How many times do you just feel drained but continue to push yourself thinking that you're just lazy, thinking that you'll be okay, pushing yourself to the limit? And we have to think about this now. These symptoms are important because the body tells us what's going on in the mind. Everything that's happening on the physical level happens first on the mental level. So energetically, you're drained. Mentally, you're also drained. Not just saying that every time you experience a lack of energy, you're going through grief. What I'm saying is, whenever you have those moments where your energy is not where it should be, start asking yourself questions. That's when it's time to go within and do what your body is telling you to do. Get some rest. Another clue that there may be grief there is changes to your sleeping patterns. You're not sleeping the way that you used to. It may be difficult for you to get sleep, or as we talked about, the lack of energy, it may be that you're getting too much sleep. You may be sleeping more than what you normally would. Insomnia, that's a big thing. You can't sleep because your mind is focused on the future or your mind is stuck in the past. Notice your sleep patterns. Are you sleeping more than usual? Or are you laying in bed trying to get to sleep and you just can't get to sleep at all? Is your sleeping pattern disrupted? This may be a clue, especially if you notice that you have another one of these symptoms. Another one of these symptoms is unplanned or unwanted weight loss or gain. Now, some of you were riding with me back in 2021 when I talked about the journey that I went on. And I talked about the period in my life where it was an anxiety filled time for me. And what really alerted me that something was up was because out of nowhere it seemed I had lost 30 to 40 pounds. I had gotten so much lighter, and it let me know that something was not right. Sure, we try to go on diet. Sometimes we may want to adjust our weight by a few pounds here or there, but if you think that everything's normal, everything's fine, and all of a sudden you start putting on weight, because remember, sometimes food can be used to replace stress. Or if you start losing weight, because a lot of times, and this was usually a thing for me whenever I was stressed, it was more difficult for me to eat. So that means I was losing weight. So pay attention to your diet, pay attention to your eating habit, and pay attention to your weight changes. What is that saying about what's going on within you mentally? Another one of these symptoms is that you just don't feel motivated, especially when there's things that you used to love to do and now you feel unmotivated to do it. That's usually a sign that something is wrong. And another thing that happens is you're less attention and interest to your helpful behaviors. That a lot of times comes from you feeling cloudy. It just seems like you can't get your thoughts together. They call that brain fog sometimes. This next one is the last physical reaction that I'm going to share. But this one is really, really important. Your immune system is weaker than usual, meaning you may get sick more than you usually would, because your immune system is weakened. And that comes from all of these physical changes that you're going through and the mental changes that you're going through. So it's important to know that stress is directly linked to your immune system. And as I said before, we have to remember that everything that's going on in the body is a reflection of what's going on in the mind. If you're not taking care of your mind, if mentally you're not stable, it will eventually show up in the body. Now, here are some of the normal emotional reactions to grief. You can have a temporary loss or interest in things that used to bring you joy. You can feel numb, shocked, sad, and in despair, fear, or guilt. Your confidence can be decreased and your self-esteem can be decreased. There also can be an increase in your anxiety level. You may feel like you've lost control. You may have changes in capacity and the ability to deal with stress. You're less focused at work, and you may have changes in your interpersonal relationships. See what I mean? Many people are so used to being in stress mode all of the time that when these symptoms show up, it seems like something normal. But when you see these symptoms show up, pay attention. Ask questions to yourself. What's making this change in your physical body, and what's changing your emotions? That way you can recognize if it's gone too far. Now, let me tell you how you know if it's gone too far. It's gone too far if you have reached that point where you cannot get out of bed, when you have a deep sense of hopelessness all the time, when you feel listless and it won't go away, when you experience the complete lack of joy in things that used to bring you joy. Remember those times when you used to have fun just going out to the park, and now when you go out to the park, you just don't feel it anymore? Ask yourself what's going on there, what's happening. And also, if you're having suicidal thoughts, and this one is important because if it gets to this point, you need to seek help right away. If your sleep disruption does not get better over time, because we talked about earlier that grief is a process, it takes time to get over. But if it's been a year or so and you're still not able to get to sleep, or either 6 months or months up the road and you're still not able to get to sleep, it's time for you to find out what's going on with your body. If you have an inability to work, to be honest with you, I grieved my dad for most of my childhood and didn't even know. In fact, the adults in my life didn't even know. And the reason was the symptoms were so easily hidden. It also didn't help that a lot of people did not know that you can grieve for something that's still physically here. If you felt the separation or detachment from something and it was sudden, that can also cause grief. Are there any things in your life that you have or maybe even still are grieving over? It doesn't have to be as complex as it was with my dad. It could be something as simple as a job, a car, a home, a relationship. Sometimes our defense mechanism is being so tough. We feel like we're so tough that no matter what we go through, we're okay. And I promise you, we will be. But at the same time, we must make sure that we continue to do a self check in to see if there are things that we really are grieving for and don't even realize it. You can start by looking at some of these symptoms. If you recognize these symptoms, see if you can tie them to an event in your life. And then you can start working through that event or experience to try to get some relief over this grief. And by all means, if it has gone too far, you need to reach out and touch someone. That was but the first time I grieved my father. And I can remember when it was resolved. I was in high school, probably my last year in the high school, and I decided to reach out to him. I reached out to him with love and expressing forgiveness. And the forgiveness was more so for me. And that helped us mend our relationship and strengthen our bond. So sometimes when you lose things that are still here, you have the chance to go back and you have the chance to resolve those issues. Even if that person isn't here, you still can forgive yourself for the things that you put yourself through because of that situation. You know, they say it's better to have loved and lost than to never have loved at all. Well, I don't know about all that, but I do know this. As long as we're here in this material world, we're going to experience some kind of loss. There's no doubt about that. But the whole key to it is awareness. Being aware of what's going on in your mental body and being aware of what's going on in your physical body. Aligning the two in a positive way to help you get through anything that you're going through. I love you to life. This is how you manifest on purpose. Let's prepare for meditation. If you are driving, this is not the time to meditate. Please download this and save it for later. If you are not driving, please find your sacred space, the space that is safe for you, distraction free and comfortable, the space in which you can relax and focus on your breathing. Enjoy your meditation.